Welcome everyone to the 2023-2024 wet season seminar. My name's Tim Penney, I'm an aviation safety advisor. My role in CASA, I'm not an auditor or an inspector, so everyone's relaxed. No, my role is purely safety education, training, human factors and that type of thing. And also welcome to you all on behalf of our agency and our industry partners that are joining us for the presentation tonight, and you can see their logos up there. We're just going to start with a quick acknowledgement of country, and we would certainly like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all meeting today and their continuing connection to both land, water and also community. And pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We'd also like to extend that same respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples who are in attendance with us today. We are all here to learn. No one knows everything. Most of the people I know in my time in aviation that knew everything are 6 feet under by now. We all have stuff to learn from each other. I want tonight to be, as far as practicable, a two-way flow of information. So our speakers and agenda for this evening. That's me, Aviation Safety Advisor with CASA. I've been doing this gig for more than 15 years. Previous life, pilot, accident investigator and all that type of stuff. I still love what I do. I think it's an altruistic job, and nights like these really do get me very enthusiastic, especially about the future of the industry, seeing so many young faces out in front of me. Our first presentation when I finish will be Michael Paech and his colleague Sam Bethune. Sam and Michael are aviation meteorologists from the Brisbane Forecasting Centre. Got a really good presentation on wet season meteorology for you. And then Ungerman from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. He's a senior transport safety investigator, and Lee has a very, very pertinent accident case study that he's going to take us through. So I'm sure you'll find that of most interest. Smollett, she's a TOPS controller, which is your neck of the woods. Works out of Brisbane Centre with Airservices Australia. Leanne, I'm going to refer to her later on as the voice of the North, because you'll finally put a face to a voice that many of you probably have heard over the airwaves. And we're also very, very excited to have Braden Blennerhassett. He's the head of Turboprop operations for Leidos International, or Aviation Solutions Australia, doing all the border force work with the Dash 8s out of Darwin here. And I'll introduce Braden a bit later, but he is at the recent Australian Aviation Awards. Braden was awarded the Aviation Safety Professional of the Year, so it's a real feather in Braden's cap. Why did we drag you here on such a humid night? We want to prevent aircraft accidents. Accidents involve real people. They're not just sterile statistics. Many of us that have been in the industry for a while know people that have perished in aircraft accidents. So that's why we're here. The wet season, of course, has its own unique hazards, many of which have the real potential to kill you. Now, I ummed about whether I was going to put that second dot point in, but I want to drive it home from the start. Many of the hazards that you will experience, especially for those newcomers to the top end, over the next few months, do have the real potential to kill you. Northern Australia, of course, is a destination location for a lot of many young and inexperienced pilots heading out on their first jobs. Many of them come out from the southern states through the flight schools, and they head up here with the car packed, 200-300 hours in the logbook looking for that first gig. Okay. Many of those pilots are yet to experience the full range of hazards that the wet season does present. So that's a big reason why we're here as well. And we want to highlight to you throughout tonight the considerable resources that we have that are freely available, not only from ourselves at CASA, and I'll show those later, but from all of our agency partners that you can take hold of and use those resources to assist in your risk management and to assist you make better operational decisions. That's a big reason why we're here. So what do we want you to take away with you? 3 things. The first is a greater understanding of the hazards of wet season flying, and Michael and Sam from the Bureau will delve into that in a second. An appreciation that safe and successful wet season aviation is entirely possible. Of course it is. Of course it is. But it does require a more considered, a more judicious, and perhaps even a more disciplined approach to the way you go about things, whether you are an individual or the operator that you work for. And the third thing we want you to take away is a renewed knowledge of those resources that will help you confidently go and tackle the wet season that is upon us. So what do we ask of you before we kick this into gear? What do we actually ask of you? Please approach tonight with an open mind. As I said at the outset, no one's perfect. Be humble. People that are prideful usually end up in bad situations in this industry. What we do is essentially safe, but it's a high consequence activity when we get it wrong. No one knows it all. Be humble. Approach tonight with an open mind and a willingness to share your experiences, either in a Q&A session or mingling up the back or chatting to us after the night is over. And ask questions. It's a rare opportunity to have so many subject matter experts in front of you tonight. Don't waste it. So when you leave here, a renewed commitment to use all these resources to increase your safety margins and make better decisions. And finally, be prepared to ask yourself, what can I do to improve my risk management and make better decisions next time I go flying? Without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Michael Paech. He's a senior aviation forecaster, and he'll be joined by Sam a bit later on to talk about the Northern Australian tropic region, specifically about the wet season. So if you join me giving Michael a round of applause. Thanks, Michael.
As Tim mentioned, I'm a senior forecaster with the Bureau of Meteorology out of the Brisbane office, and Sam here is a tropical forecaster also out of the Brisbane office. Out of our office, we issue, we transmit, and we monitor, update, amend all forecasts for Northern Australia and also Eastern New South Wales. So that's going to include all of Queensland, all the Northern Territory, WA. So it's pretty much all the tropical regions that we're talking about are the Kimberley, top end, and North Queensland. Going to present on several topics tonight, but just be aware we're not going to cover everything. There's been a couple of other wet season briefings over last year and again a few years before that are available on the web that will give you other information further to what I talk about tonight. So just a brief overview of what I want to go through tonight. We're talking about the forecasts and the warnings that we issue. Going to include our favourite topic, the gaffs, and how to interpret a wet season gaff. Also going to look at the limitations of those forecasts in particular. What is it that we are able to tell you? Also looking at how to access that weather information and where to find it. Another big topic I'll talk about are weather radars, and particularly for the tropics, what are the limitations that you see and what we have when we're using the radars? And finally, Sam's going to talk to you about when you call us to talk to us, just some tips about what you can talk about with us to get the best experience for both parties. Okay, so for a start, look, as commercial pilots and as private pilots, you'll be aware of at least some of the forecast and warning products that we issue. And in fact, the Bureau, as the ICAO designated provider of those forecasts, you're actually required to get the weather from us through NAIPS. So, but we are designated providers of these forecasts. So as you can see from the screen, the forecasts that we issue include TAF and the TAF3 for Darwin and Cairns. We issue the graphical area forecast, the GAFs, and when significant weather falls outside of the forecast GAF area, like thunderstorms, then we'll issue an AirMet so that you're aware of the new situation for particularly hazardous weather. Grid point winds and temperatures, another product that we issue. SIGMETs we issue from our office. Now look, I guess the most common signal you're going to be facing or seeing when you're going through the wet season will be thunderstorm SIGMETs. And in particular, frequent thunderstorms and also squall line thunderstorms. During a monsoon, you may also see some headed thunderstorm forecast, but mostly it's the frequent and the squall line SIGMETs. We also issue airport warnings for the airports you see on the screen: Darwin, Tyndall, Alice, Cairns and Townsville, and that's for when we've got significant weather approaching, in particular thunderstorms. There is one product that I suspect many, if not most of you are not aware of, and that's our airport weather briefing. We issued that for Darwin during the wet season. It kicked off at the start of October, so just a few days ago, and it lasts through to, I believe, late April. Okay, now the airport weather briefing is issued twice daily, after the 18 Zulu TAF goes out and after the 06 Zulu TAF goes out. And you can access that, that product if you're going through NAPES, go to briefing and then go to general Met forecasts, and you'll be able to access that product. It's basically, we write a narrative about the weather there in English and in plain language. We talk about what's driving the weather, what are the different things that are occurring. There is also a dedicated section about thunderstorms. On the TAF, you're only going to see Prob 30s or Prob 40s and the like. In that product, we also talk about where do we think there's a 10% chance of a storm getting to Darwin? What about a 20% chance? So you'll see that product, if you look at it, you might find gives you a better appreciation of the weather than you can get from the TAF. Before I go any further, you'll have heard this heaps of times before, and you'll probably hear it again and again and again. But from the Bureau's perspective, I really need to point out the hazards associated with thunderstorms being the most significant weather attribute that you'll face during the wet season. By far the most dangerous aspect of storms is significant wind shear and turbulence. So look, in a decent storm, you can expect upwards of 40 to 60 knots of wind shear over your wings in a short period of time. Unfortunately, and I'll quote Tim again from before, that has killed before, and it's our intention for not to do it again, and that's part of the reason why we're talking to you tonight. Okay, so it's a significant part of thunderstorms. Look, there are other hazards associated with storms which you're probably all familiar with, like low visibilities, low cloud bases, and the like. And look, also expect in the tropics, because we've got larger droplet size or rain droplet size up north than we do down south, you can expect like really large accumulations of rainfall on the runway in a short period of time. Great thing about the top end in the tropics, it also flows away pretty quickly as well. So just a little bit of perspective on that just at the moment, I guess. If you've been watching the news, like there's some real flooding issues down in Victoria at the moment. So like the Gippsland area over the last 24 hours had like 100 to 150 millimetres of rain, and we've got significant flooding across eastern Victoria just at the moment. So just in the tropics, 100 to 150 millimetres is really not much at all. Like that's not rain, really. Like to quote Linda Evangelista, supermodel of past, we don't sort of get out of bed for less than like 50 millimetres in an hour. You know, so like it's like the rainfall rates up here, like expect really significant rainfall rates. I remember one night I handed over to another forecaster the Cairns area forecast, and I forecast, look, it might be 100 to 200 millimetres overnight just in Cairns. Came back the next morning and they'd had like 400 millimetres overnight. So it's not unheard of to get massive amounts of rainfall. Having said that, it also dissipates pretty quickly. So the takeaway message is, don't fly in a storm, not anywhere, but particularly not in the tropics. And just to give you a bit of an idea of the distances that we apply at the Bureau, when we're looking at scoreline sigmets and distances and so on, we apply a distance of a 20 nautical mile margin distance from flight to storm. So if we're looking at a scoreline sigmet, we actually, if there's 40 nautical miles difference between two cells, that's not enough gap for us, because like 20 nautical miles straight down the middle, you're probably too close. So when we're issuing those sorts of sigmets, we're looking at quite large distances between storms. That's what we work on. The picture on the screen here is of Hector the convector. Now, look, I'm hoping that most people in the room know about Hector, and if you haven't heard of it, you soon will. Okay, it's a almost daily thunderstorm that occurs over the Tiwis, just to the northwest of Darwin during the wet season, and that's due to sea breezes coming from opposite sides of the Tiwi Islands and colliding in the middle, produces Hector almost daily. Firstly, let's start with TAF forecast, and there's a number of items I want to highlight regarding TAFs. They're to describe the weather expected at an airport, but remember that, in fact, the main use of a TAF is as a fuel policy for you. That is, the TAF dictates to you the amount of fuel you legally have to carry to deal with the weather at your end port. So it's a fuel policy. And because that's a reason, it's what we call a blunt instrument or a deterministic forecast. So the TAF says, this weather's going to happen now with this sort of cloud and this sort of wind, and then at this time it's going to change to this, and we're going to get some new conditions, and somewhere in there we're going to have some pretty rubbish conditions where you can't land for a little bit, okay? You all know the weather doesn't really work just like that. It doesn't suddenly magically change from this set of conditions to this set of conditions. It's pretty much an average forecast during that time. The winds, the cloud amounts and the cloud heights are all going to vary a little bit during that time. So the forecast as a TAF is that blunt instrument going, this is a fuel policy, and we're going to expect these are the mean or the average conditions during those periods of time. For thunderstorms on a TAF, though, we do forecast probabilities occurring. Now, thunderstorms are generally hit and miss, okay? And while we think we do a reasonable job of forecasting where areas of thunderstorms can occur, we're not good enough to go, you know, at Jabiru, that storm in 5 hours' time is going to hit you directly head on, or is it going to miss you by 30 or 40 miles? You know, we know that they're hit and miss, and so that's where we apply that 30% chance, prob 30, on the TAF. And if you hit the prob 30 mark or prob 40, you've got to carry fuel. Okay, that's the deterministic or the blunt instrument that occurs. Depending on if it's a quieter day, storms might still be possible, but we don't think it's a 30% chance yet. So it might be a prob 10, doesn't make it to the TAF, and you don't have to carry fuel. So with that in mind, I just wanted to highlight a couple of TAFs that I made up, sorry, but with particular reason in mind. First one, I've got two Gove forecast TAFs there. Many of you flying to Gove will know, or Nhulunbuy, that it's an interesting location because it's the far eastern end of the top end, and you've got sea breezes that come from different directions, but mostly the sea breezes converge west of or well inland of Gove. And that's where the storms are going to occur. The storms at Gove mostly, unless there's a Gulf line coming, mostly form over land, inland, and they often move away. So that's the normal situation for Gove. On this TAF, we had a strong sea breeze that day, and we decided that the storms are going to form well inland, not going to be much of a risk to Gove, so you don't have to carry fuel according to that TAF there. The one underneath it, this one here, sea breeze is not quite as strong, so we realised that the storms are going to occur still inland, but maybe a little bit closer than what we felt comfortable with. So what we decided to do was to put, you know, an inter for showers, but with a TCU in there to give you a bit of a hint, tell a bit of a story that it's probably a little bit more of an interesting day. The thing about that is, when I was making these TAF, that's a prob 10, that's a prob 20. It didn't actually make the TAF, but on those days, a storm there was a non-zero chance, but it has to be like 30% chance for us to put it on the TAF. Same thing down here with the Jabiru TAF. Jabiru TAF there, the first day, there's no storm sitting there, like you don't have to carry fuel. Second one down here, sorry for those people at the back, it's a little bit low. I've got a prob 40 sitting on the bottom line there. The thing to realise with that TAF, that first one there, that was actually a 10% chance of getting a storm there that day, but it was so hit and miss, we didn't think it was as likely to make you carry fuel. And the second one, we had a 40% chance. Alternatively, there's a 60% chance you're not going to get a storm at all there. So that's the way these things work. So how do you as pilots know that? There's several ways you can maybe go about that. One is, whatever we've got on the TAF is what we've got on the TAF. It's our best forecast at that period of time. We may amend it as things change through the day, but that's our best forecast. Other things you can do is you can give us a phone call. You can go, I've read your Jabiru TAF. I'm just a bit worried. And Sam will talk about that later on. You can give us a call. And the other one I've just mentioned here is you can actually use the Darwin Airport weather briefing, where we give you actual percentages of what we think, particularly for Darwin. So you can see those aren't necessarily 30% chance. All right, moving on. Grid point, winds and temperatures. An interesting looking product, often very difficult to get your head around or to actually to read. All I want to mention about this tonight is that this product is completely automated. It doesn't have any forecaster input from us in the office. It just goes out automatically with Australian access model winds, which we anecdotally understand perform pretty well above what we call the boundary layer, above the surface of the Earth. Certainly at a bit of an elevation, we understand that these work particularly well. we don't get any feedback on that. So like if you have any feedback or if you have any questions about it, we're always happy to take a call. Okay, to gaffs, everyone's favourite or not topic. I'd like to run through a number of gaffs for tonight. So firstly, gaff is a broad overview of the expected weather. It doesn't convey fine detail about particular locations, but it is very broad. For example, when we're forecasting thunderstorms on the gaff, we will present the area where all of the ingredients are possible for a thunderstorm to form. Okay, that means there's enough moisture around, the atmosphere is unstable enough, and we've got something to get the storm going in the first instance. As you know, in the tropics, that ends up being a really large area. So, most of the time it's at least the top end, if not more. So it is quite a large area. I would just like to point out a couple of the terms or the acronyms that you see there. ISOL, isolated, is actually anywhere from 1 to 50%. So that's quite a large coverage of the area. So that area, if we've got 40% of that area covered with thunderstorms, it's still isolated. Like if we've got 2%, one single storm, it's still isolated. If we jump up to 50 to 75%, that's occasional storms or scattered showers. And anything greater than that is frequent storms where we must have a SIGMET out for that, or widespread showers. So they're just the numbers that are applied to the gaff. All right, we're going to look at some pretty typical gaffs that you will see issued during the build-up or the monsoon break period. And I've got an example on the board, and again, I apologise to the people at the back. I'll blow this up just in a minute and have a look at it. Yeah, this is a fairly typical gaff for the build-up or monsoon break. Build-up, monsoon break, we're just starting to enter first build-up now, characterised by just uncomfortably hot and humid. Tim mentioned it before, even I felt it after living in the tropics for a while. It's still uncomfortably hot and humid, and we get your normal afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms, maybe lasting into the night, but often that's associated with Gulf line activity. So just blowing up this particular gaff, I want to spend just a few minutes just looking at this gaff to say, well, this is a typical one you're going to get through the build-up period. Okay, so I might actually just point this out. We've got area A all the way through here. That whole area is area A, and we've got area B through here. Looking over to my right at the descriptors of those areas, area B, there's no weather in area B, and that's often the case in a build-up. We've just got smoke and thermals. Having said that, I know thermals are not your friend at this time of the year. It's certainly not terribly comfortable. Mod turb goes on the gaff every day. It's just sort of like, and sorry, I don't mean this in a flippant way, it's almost like a throwaway line for us because you just know you all know it's going to happen out there. Okay, but let's have a look at area A through here. So that entire area, including this little sub area, is characterised by this description over here. The mean condition is we've got no weather, just with scattered cloud, 6,000 foot bases, 2,500 foot over the coast and over the sea. And then we've got smoke, we've got isolated showers, isolated thunderstorms, and turb in that area as well. We've highlighted one area that we're particularly worried about, this A1 area through here. So we're just within that A area, it's particularly worrying. We've got occasional thunderstorms in there, greater than 50% of the area, and isolated, quite dangerous thunderstorms in there. So why have we got that highlighted? Why would we think that area is going to be worse than others? And it comes down to why do storms form, or how do they form? And a lot of them need a trigger to get them going. And in this case, or in fact, most cases during the wet season, it's a sea breeze. As it pushes off the coast and over the land, that sea breeze collides with the residual air that's there, and we get thunderstorms kicking off. So that area here is right where the sea breeze is expected to be. That's where most of your storms are going to be. So if you've got a flight, Darwin out, you're doing your afternoon flight out to Maningrida or to Elcote or Mullumbimby or somewhere out there, you look at that gaff and you go, am I going to track back via land or am I going to track back sea coast? You know, and to me, it's fairly obvious you're going to go sea coast through there. So that's the story that we're trying to tell with this gaff. All right, moving on to a monsoon type gaff. So a monsoon, is the very different weather. The first monsoon we normally get late December. Sometimes it's been a little bit later, sometimes a little bit earlier. And the monsoon, if you haven't experienced, is just, we get the air moving across the equator, big northwesterly fetch of air that comes onto the coast, and is characterised by just widespread rainfall, widespread rain, squally showers. You get the occasional storm, but mostly it's embedded within the rain. So it's days, it can be like days and days of just this really rubbish conditions with lots of rainfall and squally showers. So this is a typical type of gaff that you would see during a monsoon period. So on this gaff, I've blown it up a little bit. I'm not going to worry about area B tonight. That's just showers and storm. But my area A through here is where we have designated the monsoon. And this was an actual gaff from last season. In area A, looking through this, we're saying the mean condition is actually, we're expecting rain everywhere and 8,000 metres visibility. So the visibility through that entire area is not going to be 10K and greater. Okay? We've also got widespread rain, we've got scattered showers and embedded storms. Just always be worried if we've got something like a low marked on the gaff. We do that for two reasons, or one of two reasons. One could be that's our main weather producer. The reason we got the weather is because we've got the low there. But the second and most normal reason we put a low on there is there's a chance it's going to turn into a tropical cyclone. So just be aware of that. So look, that's a fairly typical monsoon gaff. So after all that, where do you access your weather information? And by the way, this is for all of Australia, not just the tropics. As I mentioned before, you've got to obtain all your forecasts through NAIPS from us. But tonight, I'd just like to look at some other useful weather information that you can find that might help you. I've got webcams there. Webcams have transformed our work in the office, because in the past, we've always just relied on our instruments, ceilometers and vismeters, but when we've got a webcam there, we can actually ground truth what our instrument. There's awesome webcams on the Airservices website for Darwin, for Broome now, for Cairns, Townsville, Mackay and Horn Island. You've got access to them as well, but they are really, really good webcams. At some of the other airports, some of the local operators have put up their own webcams at different airports, and you can access them as well. If you actually Google my airport cams, you'll get a map of Australia. You can find where all the different airport cameras are. And so they're really useful in actually ground truthing what it actually looks like now. But I will add a word of caution with that. With the tropical storms blow up and dissipate really quickly. Matter of like maybe 10 to 20 minutes, you could see a storm go from like just high base Q into Charlie Bravo and thunderstorms, like 10, 20 minutes. So what you see on departure at a webcam may not be what you're going to arrive at that airport with. So just be aware of that if you're looking at the webcams. Another source of really good information is on the Bureau page, and I'm pretty sure you can get it elsewhere. You can look at the satellite images that have access lightning data. So if you're looking at the lightning data, you can actually combine that with the radar as well and get a bit of an idea of what's happening around the weather traps. I'd like to spend just a little bit of time just looking at weather radars, something we haven't talked about seasons before. So I'd like to take a bit of time just looking at how weather radars work, and importantly for the tropics, what are their limitations and what do you have to be aware of? Look, let me start by saying radars are awesome. Like they give us a fantastic picture of what's happening weather-wise and rainfall-wise and storm-wise. And they shape a lot of the decisions that we make and also what you make. So they're awesome that way, but they do come with a couple of takeaway notes. Essentially, what a radar does is it sends out this packet of radiation, interacts with something in the atmosphere, and then that radiation either gets reflected back to the radar or elsewhere, and then the radar just measures that, just measures how much that radiation comes back to it. And that's simply all it does. The Bureau weather radars, what happens is the radar sends out a beam and it does a complete circle, complete a rotation in about 20 to 30 seconds. But then what it does, the radar then tilts up another couple degrees and does another circle, and tilts up another couple degrees, does another circle. And that takes about 6 minutes to go through that entire cycle. It's awesome for us in the office because we get a three-dimensional representation of a thunderstorm. So we actually get everything in 3D, and we can determine what sort of storm we have, what's the likely movement, what's the likely intensity. But the takeaway for tonight is what you see on the website is that very first scan that went around, that's what you get. What's happening lowest down. But it's about 6 minutes old, okay? So when you get it, it's about 6 minutes old. So again, as I mentioned about storms going up and going down pretty quickly, what you see there may not be what is actually happening to the minute, okay? While I'm on this slide, I've got this name down here called attenuation. What that refers to is as the radar beam goes into some precipitation, a storm in particular, the radar beam gets scattered around, or almost you could say the energy gets used up, so to speak. That's not actually what happens, but that's it's what it seems like. And so the radar may struggle to see what's behind that storm. Okay, so you might see the first storm, but because of attenuation and that radiation being, I guess, all over the place, you may miss what's behind it. And that's also true, I guess, of your, if you have got radar in cockpit, that will be the same with that too. You know, it may get attenuated. It won't see beyond what you've got there. Most of the radars can do a reasonable job of that. It just depends on the type of radar that we're using. Across the top end, we've got C-class radars from the Bureau. What they do, they give you a really nice tight image, a really good resolution of the image on the radar, but it does mean that it has got a fair bit of attenuation. It doesn't see as far through the storms. All right, a number of the radars, including the 3 radars located along the northern coast of the top end, are Doppler-enabled radars. In other words, they can actually measure the wind and the wind strength using Doppler shift technology. And I thought tonight, just in case you didn't know how to read the Doppler output, I'd just quickly run through that for you. Any blue colour is wind that's coming towards the radar. Any orange to yellow to red is any wind that's moving away from the radar or has a component moving away. Can't tell you exactly what direction it is, but you can actually get a sense of what's towards and away. So in this particular radar image, I've got this wind here coming towards the radar. This is going away from the radar. So right here is where we're going to have a pretty major storm, some pretty major wind shear, and that's not where you want to be, okay? If you have trouble remembering which is which, just think about cars on the road. If you've got cars coming towards you, the lights are normally white or bluish. So cars coming towards you. If you're seeing tail lights, the car's going away from you. So if that helps you to remember which one is which. Now, along in the tropics, there is a situation where we get, often with sometimes with a squall line thunderstorm, where the winds that come in behind the storms are really, really strong. We call it the rear inflow jet. So behind some squall lines, the wind coming in behind is really, really strong. In fact, it's so strong that our radar scale can't handle it, okay? And so it does what we call aliasing back to the opposite direction. So on this one here, and again, apologies for the people at the back, I've got all this wind coming towards the radar, and suddenly in this area here, it's trying to tell me that I'm going away from the radar all of a sudden. It's actually not the case. It's just that the winds here are so strong that our scale can't handle it, and it's actually aliased to the complete wrong direction. So if you see that, again, you go, I don't want to be anywhere near that, thanks. Shouldn't be anywhere near it anyway. That's called aliasing. Just finally on radar, just a couple of other limitations I just want to note. At the lowest angle radar beam, as this radar beam moves away from the radar, it doesn't hug the ground, okay? It actually goes out at about 1 degree. Curvature of the Earth also means that as the radar moves away from the radar, sorry, the radar beam away from the radar, it gets higher and higher from the ground. In fact, if you're about 50 nautical miles away from the radar is actually sampling at about 5,000 foot. If you're 80 miles away, it's normally sampling at around about 10,000 feet. So if you're looking at the radar going, well, at Jabiru at the moment, maybe 80 odd miles away from Darwin, it looks like it's all okay, or it's really, 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 really bad, just realise that the radar beam's already sitting at about 10,000 feet at that stage. Okay, so the radar beam continues to move upwards. at night time, if there's a really strong low-level inversion, the complete opposite can happen. And we often see this on the Broom radar, where if there's a really strong low-level inversion, the radar beam gets trapped underneath the inversion and keeps interacting with the ground. And so you get on the radar this massive amount of return and there's no clouds in the sky. Okay, it's called ducting. So I say if you're heading over Broomway, sometimes at night time you can see that happen up there. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that radars simply work. It's just a mathematical formula, mathematical coding. How much radiation is coming back to me? Let's make an image using a mathematical coding formula. And so that coding is generally not dissimilar from Melbourne as it is to the tropics. So you can see sometimes the output, depending on where you are in Australia, can vary. So just sort of look at I guess more the direction of storms and as well as I guess the amount of precipitation. So that's it from me for a sec. I'd like to introduce Sam, who's going to come and talk to you about contacting us. So thanks, Sam.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much, Michael, and thanks to all of you for coming out. It's great to see you. So here at the Bureau, wet season's a big deal. We're really into it. Lots of big storms, lots of rain. Don't know how we feel about that low cloud, but it's all around a very interesting time for us. And we hope that by the end of tonight, you'll be similarly enthused and excited to see what unfolds this 2023-24 season. So I am Sam. I'm an aviation forecaster, and Michael's a senior aviation forecaster. And we're both in the Brisbane Centre. So the way it works in the Brisbane Centre is there will be 5 of me and 1 of Michael overseeing us, and we do what's called a desk. So that consists of a GAF area and the associated TAFs, SIGMETs, AirMets, NOTAMs, you name it, within that area. So obviously we do NT. We also do WA North, all of Queensland, so there are 2 GAF areas there, and also New South Wales East. So basically the top of the country, really. And that works really well for us because we get to have this geographic focus and think, what's going to unfold on the top end today, what's going to happen on the Queensland South Coast, that sort of thing. But it's also really good for you because where you're flying, you can call us up on this number right here in the bottom left of the GAF and just talk it through with us should you have any questions about TAFs, GAFs, products, whatever, after you've checked them. So that's one of the things that we really enjoy is just talking to pilots because we're specialist aviation forecasters. We don't do public weather or fire weather or anything like that. We just do aviation. We love it. We love talking to you all, and please do call up. When you do, we get a lot more out of it when it's it's a broader discussion. So sometimes we get people calling up and they're honestly the best intentions. They're just trying to make our lives easy and go fast like you would with a tower controller. It's not the time to be telling jokes to the tower controller when you're on the phone with them. But with us, you can do that really. We're just take your time. Often I'll get queries like someone will call up and say, what's going to happen with low cloud go in the next couple of hours? And that's great, and that's really thoughtful, but often it's better if it's more on the side of, my name's Sam, I'm flying with Air North today, and we're looking to get from Darwin to Gove at about 00Z, and we'll be flying VFR, so we're just a bit worried about the cloud there, what can you tell me? And that's just a more productive discussion for us. Because going into my next point about your specific question about the forecast element, not all questions are sort of things that we can treat equally. Like a lot of the questions you might ask me, I might say, oh, I don't know. That's a great question. Other ones, it falls into 2 categories often. There'll be stuff where we've issued the TAF, we've issued the GAF, and the answer's there. And should we have second thoughts about that and think, oh, we've got a better idea now, we'll just update that product. But on the more interesting end of the scale, there's stuff that we can't put on those products because, as Michael was saying, they're disblind instruments really. Like the TAF, real weather doesn't fit on Inter and Prop 30 and from lines just like that. So I'll give some examples. If you call up about Darwin, say when are the storms going to end today? Usually the TAF is your best bet. We'll be cutting them off at 10Z in the Prop 30, that sort of thing. And if we think, oh, well, maybe it's going to run a bit later, we'll amend the TAF, and you'll get your notification and everything. But for alternate conditions, so a storm lasting longer than an hour at the airport, not an ideal scenario. We do have the power to express that on the TAF, so we can use a Prop 30 for alternate conditions. That'll just look like a Prop 30 tempo for a thunderstorm, but there'll be no tempo. But if it's a bit more marginal than that, if it's either impossible or not impossible, but not that likely, it won't appear on the TAF at all. There'll just be nothing. And then if that's a situation that you're really interested in, you really want to know if it's going to be alternate or not, because it's going to really affect you, it's a great idea to call up, because it could be we'll say, oh, not today. It's a microburst day. It's not really going to last longer than an hour. Or we could say, yeah, it's not impossible. It could happen. It's just it's not a 30% chance, It's a Prop 10, Prop 20, and ultimately that's what the phone number is there for. Those are interesting questions, and we can answer those. So another one's with the gaff, isolated. It's anywhere from 0 to 50. That's a lot. That's a long range, and we can't discriminate between that. There's no plus or minus isolated. So if you're wondering what side it's going to err on, please do call up, because we can definitely have a crack at whether it's going to be closer to just a couple of storms today. Could be anywhere in that area, or if we're saying, could get squall lines coming through, forming a wall that's going to force you off, not very good. So that's another area we can definitely add some value. So the last point there is operational sensitivities, and you know those much better than I do. You know what you should probably be telling me, whether you're VFR with the option to upgrade to IFR. Out here in the territory, a lot of your routes that you fly are very flexible, and often you'll have a lot of things on your to-do list. So if you can fill us in a bit about that, often that goes a long way. We get RFDS calls sometimes where we'll be talking through a scenario. What if I go an hour earlier? What if I come from the west? What if I come from and it's during those discussions, particularly when the weather is a bit diabolical, that we can really add some value. So if you remember something, I'd really like it to be that. I guess some lesser points, but maybe important as well. Just some things to bear in mind is that often when you call, you'll get me, say, if you call for NT. And if you ask me a really curly question, which I hope that you do, then I'll have a think about it and I'll say, well, I've got my thoughts, but I'm gonna converse with Michael. I'm gonna with my chief pilot, so to speak, and maybe there's someone else on that night who's done a similar scenario in NT and they know the answer, sort of thing. So we'll discuss that for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will call you back. So what do I tell you that? I guess if you're out standing on the tarmac, ready to go, and you call us, and I say, we'll call you in 5 or 10, it could be a bit awkward. So we'll just fill you in on that one. In a similar vein are the handovers. So we work from 7 to 7, East Coast time, in Queensland, no daylight savings. And from about 6:30 to, say, 7:30 almost, we could be handing over. So that means that we'll be logging in and out of computers, and if you call, we'll definitely take it and so on. But it could be just a bit slow, So if you get in before or after, that's generally going to be the best thing for you. Yeah. So I've blasted a whole lot of information at you now, but I'd just like to do one more point, if that's okay, and that's about feedback. So there's a lot of anecdotal feedback around the community about the Bureau, and we encourage that. But we also really love your interesting feedback. And so what might that be? Some examples. In the dry season, I've got some really great calls about locations where we know they get a lot of traffic, but there's not a TAF. So Ramingining, Millingimby, these sorts of places where we know that you guys fly. If someone calls up and asks for a verbal forecast because there is no TAF about low cloud or something, what's the cloud situation like this morning? that East Arnhem region definitely does get cloud in the dry season, then often we'll give you something. And then we know that you guys are under so much pressure, you're trying to build your hours, rah, rah, rah. But if you've got 5 minutes to call us back and tell us what happened, because there often isn't, a whole lot of observation going on out at those ports. We don't have a Solomon, I don't have a Vismeter. We are honestly so appreciative of that. If I tell you it's currently probably broken at 1,000 feet, and in an hour when you think you're going to get there, we're looking more at scattered 020, and you call me back and say, yeah, it was lifting when I got there. It was about 2,000 foot. Thanks for that. That's so helpful. That's really great. We're very thankful for that. And in the wet season, it'll often be just a little bit more complicated because you got these lows and the troughs and everything going on, and so you'll have a lot on your plate to manage. And if you call us up and ask for a briefing, we'll happily give it to you. But what we really, really appreciate, and what it's just liquid gold for us, if you can give it back, is what happened, how you responded, and how it affected you, and so what actually played out. And so sometimes we have that with a RFDS pilot from Broome. His name's Finn. He asks the really curly questions. There'll be a arm of a cyclone band going over Fitzroy Crossing, and he's just dead set. He's got to get in and all this stuff, and he'll play out all the scenarios, and then he'll take off. And when we hear from him later, how did it go? Honestly, so valuable. So we know you're under pressure, but if you do have 5 minutes to call back, you will always have a very receptive audience, and there's actually a pretty good chance that whoever you speak to will remember who you are as well. So you're helping to build some ties there. Anyway, thanks very much for listening to me and for coming out tonight. I'll hand back to Michael. Thank you.
And just quickly before we finish, I just want to highlight QR codes. The code on the right is if you want to give any feedback about any of our products, any of our services, use the right-hand QR code. On the left with the dinosaur in it, thanks Rick, that was awesome. That one's to our Knowledge Centre. That takes you straight to the Knowledge Centre on the Bureau website. There is some amazing resources on there, lots of resources regarding aviation hazards. But thanks very much.
Thanks, Michael and Sam. That was great. Without any further ado, and you can chat to Michael and Sam throughout the night and during the break, of course, I'd now like to hand over to Lee Ungerman from the ATSB, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. Lee's got a really, really good illustration of an accident case study, which has some really pertinent points, especially for the VFR pilots up in this neck of the woods. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks very much all for coming out today. Look, we're going to be discussing an accident, an investigation that was done. Now, this goes back a year or two, back to 2001. So whilst it is a private aircraft operation, and it does involve weather and weather-related decision-making, please bear with me as we work through this. On the 23rd of April 2021, the Van's aircraft RV7A, registered XWI, was being operated on a private flight under visual flight rules from Winton to Bowen in Queensland. Now, the pilot, who was the sole occupant and owner of the aircraft, had been on a multi-day tour in company with 3 other pilots, each operating their own aircraft. Now, about 2 hours after departing Winton and about 90 kilometres to the south of Charters Towers, the aircraft sustained an in-flight breakup. The pilot was fatally injured and the aircraft was destroyed. This presentation will look at the decision-making of the pilot in relation to VFR into IMC. And the sole purpose of this presentation is to get you to think about your own weather-related decision-making. Now, there's no doubt that there's varying levels of northern weather experience in this room alone, but I encourage you to substitute your own operations into this scenario, and before you jump to judgment over the pilot's actions, think about how this type of scenario could quite easily weave its way into your own operations. Now, the Bureau of Meteorology forecasts for the day indicated that the conditions were set to deteriorate, and that visibility was set to deteriorate to within 1,000 metres in isolated thunderstorms with showers and rain, broken cloud from 800 feet to above 10,000. Severe icing and turbulence were expected in the proximity of isolated thunderstorms and cumulonimbus. A witness at Cattermole Station about 100 kilometres northeast of Winton, heard an aircraft overhead the station at a period of time that was consistent with the recorded data from XWI. However, they were unable to visually identify the aircraft due to the presence of fog. A second witness at Pajingo Station, about 17 kilometres to the northwest of the accident site, recalled hearing an aircraft operating in the vicinity at about 10 o'clock. They didn't see the aircraft in flight, but indicated that the weather at the station was heavily overcast and raining off and on for most of the morning. So the night before the flight to Bowen, the pilot contacted a friend who was a witness in the investigation, and they recall that despite the forecast, the pilot expressed a strong desire to remain with the group, even though the predicted weather may not have been conducive to visual flight. Now, all of the pilots discussed the weather prior to departure from Winton as a point of concern. And consequently, the other pilots elected to fly to Bowen under IFR, or instrument flight rules, while the pilot of XWI, being restricted to operating in visual meteorological conditions, departed on a day VFR flight. Prior to this departure, an offer was made to the pilot of XWI that should the weather be too bad for VFR flight, that one of the group would return and pick them up from Bowen and take them to Bowen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, substitute these weather conditions with a required single engine A to B charter in a more northern climate, and you begin to see the similarities in all operations involving degrading weather conditions. The accident site was located almost directly below the last known reliable recorded data point. It was in open bushland with the ground significantly softened by rain. The wreckage was distributed over a distance of about 1.5 kilometres, and with the larger and heavier aircraft components located closer to each other, and the lighter, smaller sections of wreckage found to the northwest of the main wreckage, and that was consistent with the forecast wind direction. A typical in-flight breakup scatter pattern. All major aircraft components were accounted for, but there was no evidence of any pre-impact defects. So a little about the breakup signature. The engine and nose wheel assembly were found separate to the other aircraft main components. The left wing and centre section cockpit floor, with part of the right wing spar remaining attached to the fuselage, was deformed downwards. The right wing was found nearby and showed transfer marks on its lower surface from the main landing gear tyre, showing that it had failed in mid-air. The vertical stabiliser and the upper rudder section had separated as an assembly from the main fuselage. The rivet line at the trailing edge of the rudder had burst open, and the aerodynamic mass balance, normally located at the top of the rudder, was not found at the accident site. The lower section of the rudder had torn away immediately below its centre hinge point and was located some distance away from the vertical stabiliser and the rudder assembly. The elevators remained with the rear fuselage, but the horizontal stabilisers had separated in flight and were located some distance away from the rear fuselage in the debris field. Now, this raised a number of questions to the potential cause of the in-flight breakup. Analysis began on the failure modes of the main wing components to ascertain if weather-induced gust loads or pilot-induced manoeuvre loads or design or build defects may have been factors in the structural failure. But for this, we needed to look at the aircraft flight data quite closely and other accidents that might have occurred. Two previous accidents involving RV7 and 7A variants was identified, and these were in-flight breakups involving high rates of descent and exceedance of V&E. These demonstrated similar airframe failures to that of XWI. The New Zealand CAA investigation concluded that their aircraft had entered a high-speed descent from an unusual attitude. The pilot did not recover the aircraft from that unusual attitude or the subsequent high-speed descent, and that the in-flight breakup occurred as a result of rudder flutter as the aircraft airspeed exceeded its design limitations. The Canadian Transport Safety Board concluded that after painting, the rudder was not likely balanced. As a result, the rudder was susceptible to flutter at a lower speed than designed, and the aircraft was over its maximum aerobatic gross weight during the manoeuvres. During the manoeuvring sequence, the speed of the aircraft reached 234 knots, exceeding the 124 knot manoeuvring speed and the 200 knot never exceed speed. The aircraft encountered flutter or overstress of some of the rudder components, and subsequently the vertical stabiliser and parts of the rudder separated from the empennage during flight. Now, before the more astute of you in the room start saying, jumping up and down saying that the Transport Safety Bureau and the Canadians got it wrong, I'll just note that those bullet holes that you can see are actually painted on in the bottom there. Basically, we had to start looking at the types of in-flight data and what limitations that they may present. So for an accident that occurred in such a remote area, there was quite a lot of, or a significant amount of data that was available to investigators. So the aircraft was fitted with the Dynon Skyview HDX. Now this particular instrument records about 100 flight parameters. Now most of those flight parameters are updated at 16 times per second or 16 hertz. And then after about 10 minutes, that data is then downgraded to 1 time, basically every second, or 1 hertz. The problem that we had was that during the in-flight accident breakup sequence, we were missing the last 90 seconds of the data before the breakup. Aerion satellite-based ADSB was also available, and this gave us only a few parameters, which were essentially position. And that was updated once every 6 seconds, and pretty much gave us a 2-dimensional speed over the ground. Then again, the last few parameters became erratic, and that was pretty much due to non-line-of-sight signal reception before the in-flight breakup. Additionally, the aircraft also had Oz runways on board, but it contained very limited information beyond the immediate confines of Winton and was most likely coupled to the mobile phone reception. So we'll move into a little bit about the flight now. So about a half an hour after takeoff, when the aircraft was near Cattermole Station, which is again about 100 kilometres northeast of Winton, the aircraft descended down to about 500 feet above ground level. The aircraft then conducted 2 right orbits about 7 kilometres to the southwest of the station that indicated airspeeds as low as 25 knots before rapidly descending to less than 200 feet AGL. Does anybody know the stall speed of an RV-7A offhand? No? 56 knots clean and 50 knots in the landing configuration. The aircraft then climbed back up to about 1,000 feet, and 3 minutes later, when it was overhead the station airstrip, the aircraft's airspeed reduced to about 43 knots while the aircraft was conducting a right turn. It then rapidly descended to less than 50 feet before climbing away from the station. So let's have a look at the wider view of the operations over Cattermole Station. And that shows that XWI recovered at very low level from the stalls overhead the station, and then navigated at low level back to its original track, and then turned back towards Winton. Now this appeared to be a good decision to return to the departure point given the circumstances, especially given the low level stalls and the near collision with terrain. However, at about 8:38 and about 11 kilometres on the return trip towards Winton, the aircraft conducted a left climbing turn and then recommenced to track towards Bowen and climbed to above 10,000 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't be sure why the pilot made this decision. However, it may have been due to radio communications with other aircraft and them reporting the weather en route. However, the pilot of XWI may not have been aware that the IFR flight track of the other aircraft were about 30 kilometres to the south of XWI's track, and may not have been as influenced by the encroaching weather from the north. So, about an hour later, XWI descended to about 1,000 feet AGL and conducted a large left orbit and climbed back up to 9,000 feet. Now this sort of behaviour is consistent with the scud running, or basically trying to find a visual flight path through inclement weather. About 15 minutes later, the aircraft entered into a series of manoeuvres that led to the in-flight breakup. Now, initial data plots between the Dynon and the Aerion data had continuity gaps and some unreliable data points. This still didn't give us visibility of the final in-flight breakup sequence. and it had seemingly exhausted the available data, and our cause appeared inconclusive. So we set about communications with the aircraft kit manufacturer, and that now became a priority because we needed to understand some of the common airframe failure modes. Now, a review of other accidents and the similar failure modes seemed to indicate the possibility of a high-speed control surface flutter. Now, without reliable data providing definitive proof, we just couldn't assume this to be the case. So through contact with our NTSB counterparts, we contacted Vans, the manufacturer, for information and any history that they may have had on in-flight breakups. Now, Vans were incredibly helpful and have been monitoring these accidents and was working on ways to help prevent them. So after providing them information under Section 62 of the Transport Safety Investigation Act, they identified that this was the 6th in-flight flutter event of an RV7 or 7A. And in all cases, the last recorded indicated airspeed was at or well above the margin required for FAR 23 at 220 knots. The never exceed speed for the RV7A is 200 knots. And operations over this speed cannot guarantee the structural integrity of the aircraft. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's about this time, traditionally, that you see manufacturers start to distance themselves and wash their hands of the accident. However, Vans was different, and they continue to work with us to this day to understand the failures, to look at ways to improve their design, and to protect their customers. However, for us, the lack of the final sequence of performance and airspeed data was still our Achilles heel in the investigation. So we set our data analysis group a challenge, and that was to conduct a further review of their data to see if there was any other way to be able to reliably provide further information that would assist the investigation. Now, ATSB is one of the few organisations that I've seen that sets innovation as a cornerstone of its culture, and this mindset inspired some incredibly out-of-the-box thinking that changed the outcome of the investigation. So the last 90 seconds of flight was originally not accounted for. Now, this was likely due to the power disruption during the in-flight breakup. But our team, through a series of further data analysis, they were able to identify some further data. So this further data recovered found an additional 70.5 seconds of verifiable data, and that assisted us in identifying the final stages of the flight. About 2 minutes before the in-flight breakup, while climbing slowly through 8,700 feet at about 120 knots, the aircraft entered into an abrupt climb and reduced speed to 56 knots before turning right and tracking southwards in a descent with increasing speed. After a further right turn in a shallow but increasing descent, the pilot would have received multiple over-G oral alarms as the aircraft passed through 185 knots in a 40-degree turn. That was until the pilot countered the turn by rolling left until almost inverted with a 39-degree nose-down attitude. Now, about 6 seconds before the in-flight breakup, the aircraft had increased speed above the V&E limitations for the aircraft and continued to accelerate until 224 knots with an increasing trend before the data stopped being recorded. During the investigation, ATSB analysis focused on 4 main areas. The first was pilot experience and other characteristics. So our pilot was 74 years of age, held a basic Class 2 medical certificate. The pilot held a valid private pilot's license aeroplane issued in 1975. He was qualified to fly by day under VFR, and the pilot had a total experience of about 276 hours prior to the accident flight. However, had a 30-year break after being initially qualified. Secondly, we looked at the flight into the non-visual conditions. So the weather information indicated that at least for part of the flight, the conditions would not be suitable for VFR flight. After the departure from Winton, the pilot likely entered IMC in the vicinity of Cattermole Station, and this most likely led to spatial disorientation and the subsequent stall, loss of control, and low-level recovery. On multiple occasions during the flight, the pilot most likely attempted to avoid those reduced visual conditions by significant variations in altitude, orbits, and deviations from track. When south of Charters Towers, it was likely that the pilot again entered into those reduced visual conditions, and recorded data indicated the abnormal flight manoeuvres commencing with the abrupt turn to the south. So analysis looked at and worked out the increasing likelihood of reduced visual cues, and that indicated that the pilot was most likely experiencing spatial disorientation in the period immediately prior to the in-flight breakup. Thirdly, we looked at the in-flight decision making. Now, it was very likely that after the near collision with terrain near Catmull Station, that the pilot decided to return to Winton. However, about 11 kilometres into that return journey, the pilot elected to resume course for Bowen. Again, this may have been prompted by airborne communications on weather and flight visibility at altitude from the other pilots of the other aircraft. However, the pilot of the accident flight, again, may not have been aware that those 3 other aircraft were about 30 kilometres to the south and may have been less affected by the weather encroaching from the north. Now, although the pilot was aware of the forecast weather and had already encountered that IMC, they still continued towards Bowen. The witness that spoke to the pilot the night before about the forecast weather indicated that the pilot had a strong desire to remain with the group. Therefore, the pilot probably had some self-imposed motivation or pressure to continue towards Bowen, despite the changing weather conditions. There was no operational reason for the pilot to continue the flight, given that they had plenty of fuel to return to Winton, divert, or to find other aerodromes away from the adverse weather. Lastly, we looked at the in-flight breakup. So the aircraft had accelerated past its never exceed speed, and it was likely that this initiated rudder flutter. That led to catastrophic failures of the aircraft structure and the subsequent in-flight breakup. Examination of the wreckage did not identify any pre-existing defects. However, the wreckage at the accident site indicated that cascading failures that were likely following the rudder and vertical stabiliser separating from the aircraft. Subsequently, the horizontal stabilisers likely failed, and that unbalanced the aircraft aerodynamic forces, rapidly pitching the aircraft downwards. The aerodynamic overload on the main wing structure resulted in the right main wing spar failing in a downwards direction, and then the right wing separating from the aircraft. The ATSB report concluded the following: that the pilot departed for the flight from Winton to Bowen, Queensland, knowing that those weather conditions en route were unlikely to be suitable for flight under the visual flight rules. The pilot likely entered weather conditions not suitable for flight in visual meteorological conditions, leading to spatial disorientation and loss of aircraft control, and that the aircraft's airspeed exceeded V&E, leading to rudder flutter, airframe structural failures, and subsequent in-flight breakup. There were also other factors that increased risk. These were identified as earlier on in the day in the flight, the pilot had engaged or entered into degraded visual environment over Catmull Station, most likely resulting in spatial disorientation. This resulted in loss of control, stall, and subsequent low-level recovery. And although the pilot turned back towards Winton after the near collision with terrain at Catmull Station, the pilot then resumed the flight towards Bowen into those degrading weather conditions. Other findings that were made were that there were no operational reasons for the pilot to continue the flight to Bowen, and that the pilot probably had some self-imposed motivation or pressure to continue the flight. Now, further to this, the real tragedy is that the Dynon Skyview had a wing levelling function and an autopilot, but the pilot didn't know how to use them effectively. Further to this, the pilot was in radio contact with the group the whole time, but didn't tell them about his predicament. Add to that the pilot had been in radio range and able to talk to Brisbane Centre at any time at altitude, and that they may have been able to assist him in avoiding VFR into IMC situations. However, the pilot did not make that call. Ladies and gentlemen, while the ATSB may never know the reasons for why the pilot reversed his safe weather-related decision to return to Winton, we can provide the family of the pilot with some closure surrounding the accident, even if they themselves did not understand his motivation or actions either. Being able to effectively work with our international counterparts, manufacturers and regulators stands us in good stead to be able to identify unbiased and objective, relevant findings in our reports to enhance future safety and to bring such messages like this to you today. This accident highlights the need for VFR pilots to be aware of the weather conditions that are not conducive to VFR flight. While this accident didn't occur in the far north, it does highlight the risk posed to those VFR operations in such areas and emphasises that proactive decision making, diversions and alternates should be considered by all VFR pilots. And above all, that self-imposed pressure to get the job done can be fatal. Now, ladies and gents, I would encourage any of the novice pilots in this room, if you're a novice pilot to the northern weather, go and have that conversation with your chief pilot or your senior base pilots. You might be surprised to learn that getting the job done is second to some good sound weather-related decision making. As always, you can find more information on the ATSB website, and we've got a Q code in the next slide if you wish to find out more about this particular investigation. Just like to say thanks very much to CASA for the opportunity to present at this seminar. It's been my distinct pleasure to come and talk to you today. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure to invite Leanne Smollett to come up onto the stage. Leanne is an air traffic controller based out of the Brisbane ATC Centre, looking after the TOPS sector, which is this big part of the world where you guys live and operate. Leanne, over to you.
So, as everyone's excited, I'm a air traffic controller based in Brisbane. I'm one of the dinosaurs. I didn't get my dinosaur on my Q code, but I've been a rated controller for over 30 years. I've worked sectors based around the Whitsundays in the Reef area. I've also worked quite a few of the sectors basically from Taroom all the way up past Gove, all the way out to Port Moresby, doing the central sectors at the Darwin-Tyndall area, all the way out to Broome and up to almost Indonesia. So I cover quite a bit of area in my experience. I've gone from the old green scope type of radar displays where we had shrimp boats, where we actually physically move them with procedural boards. And now we've got ADSB so much more. We've got ADSB coverage through most of our airspace now. And yeah, I've seen a lot change. And then we get One Sky, which will fix all of our problems. So if you have a problem, One Sky will fix that for you. So I'd like to first start and welcome my colleagues from Darwin Approach and Tower, who I work very closely with. They are a great bunch of people, as you guys all know as well. If you talked in and out of Darwin, they are very supportive and there to help you. So that's a bit about me. You'll hear a bit more about what air traffic control can do for you. We aren't the scary voice. I'm assuming some of you probably think we're very grumpy and very scary. Yes, I can be grumpy. Ask Darwin. But we are here to help. So basically, that is what we will be discussing. Let's talk about working with air traffic controllers. So we'll start with what I'm not. Okay, I'm not ground crew, okay? This is what everyone thinks I do. This is what society thinks I do. I am not this. They all think I work in the tower. It's very stressful, and I do this from inside a tower. It's not, okay? We don't do that. My neighbours think I do nothing, and this is true because my first neighbour thought I was unemployed. I'm not, but I am home a lot because I'm a shift worker. You guys, you just think I'm blind. All right, I'm not. I see everything. I hear everything. This is the chaos that I think I'm having, and I'm trying to control it, and that's pretty close to it. This is what my partner, actually, if I had one. But the reality is, this is what we do. Okay, we sit in front of a screen. We stare at you guys. Yes, to tower. En route is a big building. You've got to understand, Brisbane Air Traffic Control and Melbourne are the two centres in Australia. We have all of the airspace. Airservices love to promote the 11% that we have. So it's not an awful lot of airspace we have of the world, just running in two basic buildings. And you know, we're not ground crew, okay? Yes, tower, big building. We're pretty boring. So what is air traffic control? So it's defined as the safe, orderly and expeditious flow of air traffic. As VFR pilots, which one of these safe, orderly and expeditious do you think actually relates to you guys? Does anyone want to guess which one of those 3 words? Safe. For you, we care about your safety. Orderly and expeditious is all about the stuff we can control. We can't control you lot. We'd like to, but it's not impossible. But we care about your safety. We want you home every single night. We don't want to hear about aircraft crashes. We want to make sure that you get through any bad weather. We want to make sure that you guys are well cared for and looked after, and you get to come back and play again the next day. That's the important thing. Orderly and expeditious is all about our IFR and VFRs, our jets and everything. We've got to make sure that they get to A to B and as fast as they can. They've got fuel problems, issues. They don't want to be paying for as much. We try and shorten you guys up as much as we can. We are there to help you guys out. So what does this all mean to a VFR pilot flying in Class G or airspace? So basically, we want you to broadcast and assist. They're the 2 things that we can do. You broadcast and we'll assist. So we've already spoken about all the MET products that are available to us. Hazard alerts, so it might be an aircraft on a runway somewhere, aerodrome might be closed, so we'll hazard alert to make sure that you guys all know about what's going on. Airspace activation, deactivation. The restricted airspace in the top end is huge. When we have our massive, big pitch black, what was the last one we did that just went on forever and took out 90% of my airspace? It was so much fun. So much fun. And you know what? They all played outside the airspace as well. So it was like, why? What, you don't have enough? But anyway, we broadcast that. We also like it when you don't fly into it, okay? Hint, airspace that's got military jets flying in it aren't suitable for you guys, all right? Stay out. Read your NOTAMs about it. The number of pilots we see in their aircraft that are flying towards an active restricted airspace, and we're like, hey, guys, wake up, it's active. And you're like, oh, okay, we're going to go around it. You can't. So read your NOTAMs, make sure you know. We also do a lot of broadcasting of traffic. So we see a lot, particularly in the Darwin area, a lot of VFR flights and the proximity to IFR flights. So because you haven't had your level verified, we have to use 2,000 feet. So if there's a VFR flight within 2,000 feet of our IFRs, we're telling them about it. So it'd be great if VFR flights are listening out on our frequency, so when we tell them about you, that you guys pop up and go, hey, that's us. Great, and have a chat. Then you may go away to your little frequency and talk. Stay off mine. But at least listen to mine, all right? I'm awesome. We also quite often see a couple of VFRs get really close to each other, and we try and avoid that. You're obviously not listening on our frequencies because, you're busy, you've got other things to do. But we're trying to make sure that you don't collide with each other, because I can tell you quite often when I broadcast and get hold of at least one aircraft, they have no clue about the other aircraft. And we have had to do avoiding action. So pipe up and listen out, because we are trying to help. Okay, we don't like the idea of seeing 2 aircraft get too close. I am seeing a lot more VFR flights at non-standard IFR levels, or just at IFR levels. I get you're trying to get out of cloud, and I can appreciate that. But come and talk to us and let us know that you're there, so we can let you know what IFR is in the area. It's really dangerous to be at an IFR level and not tell us, because we have our IFRs at non-standard levels as well. So just pipe up. You're not going to get in trouble for it, and we can at least let you know what's going on and what aircraft are in your area that we know of. And we also talk about, when you get into close restricted airspace and SAR times. So broadcast your SAR time changes and broadcast your cancellations stuff. We are more than happy to cancel it for you. Don't have a problem. If we're really busy, we might put you at the bottom of the stack of importance. But don't forget that if we forget about you, which, I apologise, it has happened, just call us back and say, hey, that SAR time I need amended, or I've cancelled, and we're more than happy to keep doing that for you. We will assist during emergencies, obviously. So this is the crux of today. When you've got a problem, come and tell us early as possible. You know, if you are a little bit unsure about your location, which is less a problem these days with GPS, and you're all carrying it, I guess. You have a mobile, you have a phone, so maybe if you're in range. But we're not seeing as much lost aircraft as we used to when I first joined. So it's a lesser problem, but if you're unsure, let us know. We're here to help. We want to make sure you get home. If you get stuck on top of cloud, you have mechanical issues or any of these problems, come and tell us. I recently had, and it was only a few days ago, a pilot pipe up and do a pan call. And he had a problem with his fuel pump and, you know, needed assistance. It was great. He called up, got in contact with us. There was an aircraft in the area. I got him here in contact with him. So at least no matter what happened, he was going to have someone to talk to. He fixed his problem, but that didn't mean I went, oh, cool, and moved on with my job. Made sure that other pilot stayed in contact with him until he was on the ground. He made a great choice. He landed as soon as he was for Broome. He landed at Gibb River and made a great decision to make sure his aircraft got down safely. And once he landed, we cancelled the phase. We will put a phase on you. We're worried about you. We want to make sure you get home. It's not a scary thing to have a phase put on you. There's no ramifications to that. It's just our amount of concern we have for you. We get a lot of requests. Obviously, your start time creation and cancellations, Q&H requests, radio checks, time checks, weather updates. Most importantly, though, boarding updates found on our frequency. NRL was broadcast, so feel free. We will update any requests for interesting sporting results. It's true. Melbourne Cup is also a very important one, apparently. So this is my airspace. It's pretty big. There are 20 staff members in my group, 24/7 rosters. We have currently 6 sectors. So sectors are smaller pieces of this airspace. So this section here is we call central, and this bit over here is what we call west. And central is broken into 3 different layered groups. So we have all our international and domestic jets that come in, and they sit in one bit of airspace. And then as they arrive into Darwin, we have a much smaller condensed sector. And then we have what basically covers all our low-level sectors. And our west sector does something very similar. That way, if anything breaks or someone having a problem, we can break our sectors into much smaller portions and give you the dedicated time and resources just for you. And has happened that way. I had it was a Jetstar jet that was having major problems with his aircraft mechanical, and he sat and hovered and held just off the boundary of Indonesia, working out whether he was going to return. In that, every single aircraft we transferred to it. I split off another sector and had that one aircraft was being spoken to by one person because it was a lot of work. And if you guys are having a problem, we want to be giving you, we don't care that you don't pay for the service. We care about you getting home. That is it. So don't be afraid of actually saying something because we have a lot of ability to split and manage our workload. So yeah, basically there are 3 sectors in the central and 3 sectors over in the west side. There is approximately 810,000 square nautical miles of airspace I control. And sometimes all of this, particularly at the beginning of a midnight shift, is done just by one person. So it's an awful lot of airspace we look after. The west has obviously a little bit smaller, and central is even smaller than them. We have 19 VHF frequencies. That's a lot of frequencies, A, to memorize, but B, we can help out with. So each one of these black written WADs, Darwin, Jabiru, Tyndall, Dugan, Kununurra, Horse Creek, Limbunya, Fitzroy Crossing, Balgo, Broome, Derby, and Dugan are all our VHF frequencies. Some have multiple. Know where they are. Know the frequency, particularly the low frequencies. Like most of these places all have double frequencies, one for high and one for low. But at the end of the day, if you're in trouble, we don't care which one you're calling on. Just you get on one of the frequencies and let us know that there's a problem. Okay? Know where they are, and if you are out of range on VHF, start flying maybe towards one so you can get in contact with us. Broadcast on them anyway. Know your location, know where the VHF position is, and then start broadcasting you need assistance. We have up to sometimes 40 other aircraft in the vicinity, high-level jets and a lot of lower-level jets. Someone will hear you, okay? That make it an option to at least have a go at it. Be on the right frequency. Know your frequency. The sector also has 4 third-party HF groups, so know your HF. We've got the Gulf, we've got Kakadu, and that covers quite a large area. Cocos and Silver just does this section before they head into Melbourne. We run into Indonesian airspace up the end, so that's always fun and interesting is to experience. Melbourne, yeah, no one likes Melbourne. Don't go to Melbourne, guys, don't go there. It's not fun. There are 3 military bases. We have Darwin, Tyndall and Curtin. Darwin are our favourites. Tyndall, yeah, well. And there's Curtin, they turn up when there's a little bit of fun happening. We have 4 towers, Broome, Darwin, which don't always operate anymore because we're stealing their staff, Tyndall and Curtin. Be aware though, because of the wet season, Darwin closes when the weather gets really bad. So really know what's around where you can land. Because a lot of these places, when it gets bad weather, these major aerodromes will close, and they will close up to an hour. That's a lot of holding. And not only on top of that, we're holding jets out. So guess who's last in line? You lot. So think about that when you're carrying your fuel and making your choices. We have 5 ADS-B sites. Does everyone's aircraft know you got ADS-B? Please tell me that everyone has ADS-B. Anyone know that their aircraft doesn't have ADS-B? It's a really good thing to have. We actually get a lot of coverage on our airspace. We can see aircraft, particularly obviously closer to the locations, because we got one at Broome, one at Halls Creek, one at Dugan, and one at Tyndall, and then we had the Darwin radars and the Tyndall radars, and one at Balgo. We can see quite a lot. We see more than you know. So, and we keep an eye out for you. So have ADS-B, and if it's not turned on, make sure it is. It might help you out, so we don't have to go looking for you so much. And the 3 radar sites that I've pointed out. These are our different systems. Brisbane, we have Darwin, but their system is very different to Brisbane, and our systems don't talk to each other. So we do a lot of verbal communication with each other. One Sky will fix that. But anyway, and Broome. Broome systems do talk with Brisbane, and they're very much more high-tech than they used to be. Are you prepared for the wet season? This guy is certainly not. So what is it that you can do? Basically, let's start with, I'll tell you a little analogy of what I think. Let's go for a car track. I'm in Brisbane, my hometown. I want to go for a car drive and go on a holiday. I pick my location. I don't have to think too much. I'm like, I can get my car. Not my Tesla, that's not going to go anywhere. But particularly since I hit a cow recently. Don't worry, there was no steak that night. Cow got away. Tesla's limping a little bit. Anyway, you don't have to think too much. There's a lot of places I can get fuel. The roads either have roadworks, but just a bit slower, you might go a different way. A lot of places to get accommodation, and if anything goes wrong, there's a lot of backup on the southern sides of Australia, even in the wet season, I can stop somewhere. The weather's not going to make my life hell. However, on a recent trip to WA, I decided to go up to Exmouth. I drove, then hit the Karajini National Park. A great idea. Of course, there's a cyclone up there. And of course, now I have to start thinking of what roads are going to close, what fuel I'm going to have to buy fuel. Do I need to buy fuel? Am I going to be able to get to all of these service stations that don't exist? The land is so flat that the flooding happened very quickly. And I had to start thinking of, oh, where am I going to stop? Where am I going to go? Same goes for you guys. In the wet season, you have less options. There are less places to land. The weather comes down very quickly and you've got to find some place to land if you need to. Have more options than one. Have 2, 3, and 4. Don't worry, we have to, as air traffic controllers, we don't just go, oh, this is going to work. Oh, that didn't. I don't have other options. We've got to have multiple options for everybody. So have some for yourself. Do you have enough fuel? Am I going to carry more fuel than necessary? What's the weather looking like? Am I going into it or away from it? Talk to our friends at the Mets. Ring them up. Have discussions with them before you take off. And the question when we had about the ATSB, maybe turning around or maybe even not taking off at all is an option. You know, think about, do I need to go? Will my boss like his plane in 400 pieces? Or does he want me on the ground and have to delay for a day? You know, I'm pretty sure he liked his plane in one piece. So it might be a better option for you. How many VFR pilots also have IFR training? None? 1? 2? 3? Oh, now we're getting confident. It's a hand, guys. Just has to put it up. So let's think about, like, it is a really important resource. When you get into trouble, you can actually use that rating. Think about what other options you have. The big thing is prepare. Keep up to date with all the weather NOTAMs. Situations will change very quickly. Some of our international jets deviate over 300 nautical miles. Do you have enough fuel to go around storm? Unlikely. Do you have enough time to get there anyway? Stay on the ground. But we're not kidding. They're not uncommon, 300 miles. It's not a deviation unless it's got a 100 in front of it. It's just, oh, that was just a minor deviations for anything less than 100 miles. Always have an out if the weather changes suddenly. Gear landings, frequencies to use. Should you even depart? Know what resources you have. Know and listen out on the appropriate frequencies. You know, I sound awesome over the air. I'm not always cranky. Sometimes I'm allowed coffee. All right, so talk to us. We are actually really keen to help. Don't talk to us all the time though, okay? Just talk to us when you need help, all right? And talk early. That's a really important key. Don't leave it too late. The less time you give us, the less options you have. So listen to our ATC broadcast. You'll have an appreciation to what other aircraft maybe in the area are doing. You know, if you suddenly start hearing, you know, everyone's requesting 10, 20, 30, 40 mile deviations, weather's going down pretty quick. So listen and start making different assessments. Know where the frequency locations are and consider, if you don't already have it, obtaining your IFR rating to improve your safety and marginal conditions. You can broadcast if you are out of the range of frequency and ask for assistance, okay? Again, ask early. We just want to help you. There may be other aircraft in the area who might be able to relay for you as well. Again, ask early so we can attend to your request. Liaison with more experienced pilots. So I was talking to earlier, like even someone who's experienced 3 years of weather up here in the top end is going to offer you information. As before, even the more senior control pilots, talk to them. Ask them what they do. How do they make their decisions? When do they need to think about not flying? What's the ramifications with your company? You know, like they were there to reassure each and every one of you that the importance is your safety, nothing else. When on frequency, ask questions if you're not sure to other pilots or ATC. Silence will only make the situation worse. You know, this poor dude that the ATSB Lee was talking about, he didn't ask any questions except ones that got them the answers he was looking for. He didn't tell his friends he was in trouble. He didn't tell his friends how close he came to almost hitting the ground. Had he said that, they would have possibly told him other information. Talk, be open, be honest. ATC will not be able to make decisions for you though. We're here to give you information. We're not in your cockpit. We can't see what you see. But we are there to do everything we can to give you the information. Believe it or not, we have a lot of air traffic controllers and people who work for Airservices who are pilots, who are check pilots, who have a lot of experience flying. And so we can actually ask them, or we can contact a flying school. We can get information that is relevant to you. Some more of our snazzy little photos. They look very interested about exchanging information. Listen out on the area frequency, please. Okay. So why monitor the frequency? It's basically, you just have super awesome people to talk to. All right. Just click the mic. We're there. Being on the correct frequency may save you and the ATC question seconds when you need it. Monitor the broadcast, ATC broadcasting. Listen to the weather or the weather update. Traffic that may affect you. Restricted airspace, missed start times, reports of the severe weather and deviations. You know, we may save you from getting the paperwork from CASA when you don't penetrate into the restricted airspace. You can hear the hazard alert so you don't try and attempt to land on a runway that already has an aircraft sitting on it with broken wheels. And of course, this is most important, the current sporting sports. So what I'd like you to take away from this presentation today is prepare, okay? Don't take off unless you've actually really read the NOTAMs. The number of aircraft we get that flight plan through restricted airspace. And you're like, how did you miss that? So actually read them. Make sure that you understand what you're reading. You know, I wouldn't know half the things that Mike has explained, but it's not important to me because I'm sitting in a chair in a building that I then get into my car. You guys, unfortunately, are in a plane where decisions are important. So know the information and what it's giving you. Know the ramifications of what happens when you make poor decisions. You will make mistakes, but try and avoid them being catastrophic mistakes. Monitor my frequency. Besides I'm awesome, I'd like that you are listening out. So A, it saves me time chasing you. B, that it saves you time when you need to. This is all about safety, okay? Making sure you get home safe. That is your decision making. Am I making a decision that is going to get me home? And sometimes that is, do I even need to go today? More resources. The Airservices webpage has a specific area just for pilots, has your NAPES, has everything that's important. Please go and find it and enjoy.
All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Braden now. Braden works, as I said initially, for Leidos, who have the Border Watch contract out of the northern part of Australia. Head of Turboprop operations, and as I said at the outset, recently awarded Aviation Safety Professional of the Year. So well done, Braden, and I'll hand over to you.
Cool.
Thanks, mate.
So, yeah, before anyone asks, yeah, that is a King Air and not a Dash 8. Before someone in Canberra gets excited, we can't take photos of the aircraft for obvious reasons, security and everything else. Yeah, you guys probably know me better if you've been around the traps for a little while as Lima Alpha Echo, Lima Hotel Echo, Juliet Foxtrot Oscar, X-ray Romeo Juliet, which has become Romeo Hotel Foxtrot, I think, 210. Any nods in the audience? Yeah. After that, I was flight up to 78, the original. So yeah, there's someone running around with my call sign down in Broken Hill at the moment, but I was the first flight up to 78. Now you probably know me better as Border Force 11 approaching top of descent maritime surveillance operations below 5,000. Or my personal favourite, Flight Watch 8843 Border Force 11 request, which is probably, yeah, an absolute driving you insane for those who are doing IFR taxi out in the bush. Cool, so yeah, there's a bit of a summary of my career. I am the head of Turboprop operations now. I was previously the senior base pilot up here in Darwin. I've been up here 11 years in total. So I had 5 years up here the first time around. One of those years was out in Arnhem Land, running around Millingimby, Elco Island. So I was based out there for one of the operators. You probably pick up by the rego who that was. Previous to that, yeah, senior base pilot and yeah, just a normal line crew. Spent a couple of years out of Broken Hill. That was bloody good flying out there. Highly recommend if you get a chance to go out, fly King Air out in the bush, go do it. Charter pilot for 2011 to 2015. So yeah, I've probably gone through quite a few wet seasons now. Flew 210s right through to Conquests. Previous to that, I was running around in Cherokee 6s out of Emerald, Central Queensland, and I've been previous a aircraft maintenance engineer and a airborne observer. You see that on the forecast in the middle of the wet, probably ask some questions. Wet season threats, perceived pressure, that is the biggest one of the whole lot. I guarantee you, we as pilots want to get the job done. We want to get it done in an efficient manner. We want to do things right. But I'll talk about this right at the end. So it'll tie back into what Lee from the ATSB was saying about the RV7 that ran itself into trouble. Yeah, I've been there before in that part of the country. Fortunately, without the UAs. Thunderstorms, obviously a massive threat up here. You know, there's a golden rule, can't see through it, don't fly through it. Simple as that. I can't stress enough, guys. Simple as that. Monsoons, there's an asterisk beside it. For 2 weeks of the year, roughly thereabouts, it's going to be absolutely tough going for the VFR guys getting around. Monsoons is less of a threat in Mitchell Street in the wet season. So I'll leave that one with you. That is Hector the Convector. I promise you it's taken out of a 210 or whatever I was flying around at the countryside, and I'm sure the Met guys can explain whatever the phenomena is, the ice up the top of it, better than what I could. Moral of the story is that Hector's there just about every day. You know, he's going to be sitting there north of Bathurst Island or on top of it, and out in the Snake Bay Garden Point area, I guarantee it. And he's about, you know, up to 90 miles across, because that's where Hector sits and how wide he is. The main threats for thunderstorms for us, destructive airframe loads. Can't stress this enough. You fly into one of these things, you are really rolling the dice on getting out the other side. Severe and extreme turbulence. Fortunately, oh, well, depends how you look at it. Unfortunately, I've only been subject to severe turbulence. I haven't had the extreme stuff. I don't want the extreme stuff. Stay out of thunderstorms. Wind shear for takeoff and landing. You guys are taking off with the thunderstorm front 5 miles from the airfield. Don't do it. Simple as that. Don't land with the front sitting there. You may not be able to see it up here distinctly. Down south in the bush, out in the desert, I've seen these things roll through and the big vortices that get dropped out of the bottom of these things with wind shear and the microburst activity. It's not nice. I can't imagine what it's like to be trying to take off or land with one of these things rolling through. So I've seen guys do it. I hope it was the last time they did it. Yeah, you are rolling the dice. Hail, not so much of a problem for you guys and your piston twins up here in the levels that you sit at. Down south, unforgivable, okay? It will break your windshields. I've fixed aircraft that have been damaged by hail before as an engineer. It involves a lot of hammering out leading edges. Fortunately, the Chieftain that I worked on in that particular time didn't lose its windscreen. I've heard of stories of where they have. You're really choosing your own adventure. Severe icing, yeah, you will see that if you're in and around these things. For you guys operating your King Airs, your Breyers and whatnot, getting around the countryside. If you're picking up severe icing, you're probably in the wrong cloud. Lightning, big threat. Doesn't do too much damage to the aircraft in most occurrences, but will blow out any composite structures or bearings. It is a risk. can cause quite a bit of damage. I've seen that in my time. Fortunately, I haven't been subject to it to myself. Microbursts, already spoken about it. Takeoff and landing within 5 miles of these things, you are rolling the dice. Something I want to point out that's not readily published, there is a advisory circular floating around that has been subsequently cancelled, but if you type in thunderstorms AC into a Google search, you will find something. Otherwise, it's been published in the FAA Weather Flying Handbook. It gives you guidance on how to operate in a thunderstorm should you find yourself in it, okay? If you don't like reading, just go to the last page of this AC that's been cancelled. You'll find it as a PDF. Basically, it will outline what to do if you get caught out, okay? If you get yourself caught in one of these things, you know, don't maintain an altitude, okay? You just want to ride the waves. You know, I've been in the block level between 5 and 7 before. I've disappeared into one of these things at 10, got spat out at 13. You know, it's Leanne was probably on the other end of the radio at both times. She's been up here forever. Yeah. Yeah, and that was pretty much the, when I asked for the block level, tone of the voice that I got on the other end was, what the hell are you guys doing now? Ride the waves, do your best to slow down. I'm not an aerodynamic engineer, I don't have a university degree or anything like that, but just be very cautious when you do slow down. You know, there are published rough airspeeds for some aircraft. I guarantee that most of the light aircraft that you fly do not have one. Okay, so it's probably a real example of the manufacturer doesn't want you in these things. Okay, but the King Air guys, there's a couple of you in the audience. What's the rough airspeed for a King Air? Perfect. Dash 8 drivers, it's 180 and 190 for Dash 8, 200 and 300. Your 210 doesn't have a published rough airspeed or a turbulence penetration speed. A couple other things it talks about is don't try and do a 180 out of these things once you're there. And to step back a bit, with the speed, if you decide to slow down, I'd encourage you to do so. Keep in the back of your mind, and again, please, if I get this wrong, do your own research, okay? It's just one pilot talking to a room of others. A clean wing is going to give you, generally speaking, in general broad terms, minus 1.5 G loading to positive 3.5. As soon as you extend flap, you go from 0 to 2. That's it. You remove a lot of margin with your wing loading. So that is something to consider, but just stay out of them. Running around in 310s in the middle of the build-up / wet season, doable, quite doable. Flying up here, VFR, safe as you make it. You choose to really press on, you know, you're going to have a bad day, potentially. You know, you skirt these things, keep a safe distance, you're going to have a good day, you know. The weather is flyable and it's reasonable to deal with, but you have to know what you're doing, okay? And you've got to build that bag of experience before the bag of luck runs out. These are my personal experiences in and around thunderstorms. Severe turbulence, it's not pleasant. I hate being here. Vertical speeds, plus and minus 4,000 feet climbs and rates of descent. You will experience it. It's nasty, nasty stuff. Yes, I've been in the block level between 5 and 7 because I had to be. I couldn't maintain an altitude. And if I did, I risk structural failure of the aircraft. Airspeed fluctuations are 40 knots. I've seen that. You know, I've gone from 180 knots to 220 just in the blink of an eye and back the other direction. It sucks. It really does. That says heavy rain. Should be torrential. It's like flying through an ocean, okay? Do you really need to be here? I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually been in a thunderstorm because I've been caught out, and all of those times I probably didn't need to be there. I could have, you know, burned up some more fuel, fly around it. One particular story that I want to push onto you is that we were retasked. I can't talk about my job specifically and the ins and outs of most stuff. I can talk about search and rescues that we perform. But basically, close into Darwin, I was retasked to go looking for a boat in distress. We're at the back end of our day, so we'll can do go out, have a look. You know, it's part of our job, makes it exciting. However, Hector and his mates are out there. It was just off to the northwest of Darwin here. We needed to find our way around Hector and his mates, and after the third line of fighting the weather that we probably didn't really need to be in, we broke out with the assistance from the guys in the back end without getting into it. And there was just another wall of absolute crap in front of us. It was dark as dark can be, and it's, you know, broad daylight outside. It's middle of the afternoon. I told the guys down the back, I go, look, I've taken you as far as I can. I can't take you any further. I'm not going through any more stuff. We've been pounded enough as it is, you know. The FO's looking at me and going, that's a win. And the guys down the back go, yeah, sure, no worries. So, you know, we just cut laps in between Bathurst and Darwin because that's where the clear air was. We came in, we landed, we found out that they sent the police boat out there and happy days. They rescued the crew. Turns out it was just an electrical failure and on the boat. And where the boat was underneath the next line of crap. Okay, so do you really need to be there? I've already spoken about much of this as part of one of the 402s that you guys probably get around in. What is the turbulence penetration speed or the rough airspeed of the aircraft? I guarantee you probably don't have one. So why be here to start with? Avoid flying through thunderstorms at all costs. If there's anything that you can take away tonight, this is it. Monsoons, photo out of 210. That was between Darwin and Bathurst Islands. The main threats of the monsoon, low cloud base, low visibility. That's usually brought on by showers. Main threat, I want you to take this one away, is the loss of horizon. Okay, for you VFR guys, you know, I know it's pretty obvious, but lose your horizon, you are in a world of hurt. And if you look back at the ATSB report, you know, looks like the finding was that the pilot got themselves into a UA or an unusual attitude, and unfortunately they are no longer with us. Shower activity usually causes the loss of horizon in most cases. Embedded thunderstorms, not so much of a drama for you VFR guys, for the guys that are operating in their piston twins, getting around, or even in your caravans. This is a major threat. So just because you've got two AIs, you know, you're flying away 310, 402, what have you, if your weather radar is not working, you're going to be in a hell of a pickle if you find a line of stuff here. Special VFR, that is a threat, and I'll speak about that next. So just before I do, these are a couple of pictures I wanted to flesh out for you guys. With the low cloud base and visibility, expect to encounter low cloud bases. It's just part of the monsoon. You know, the 2 weeks of the year that's broken up, you're going to see cloud down to 500 feet or lower. That's just, you know, the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Yeah, 500 to 1,000 feet is typical, can be lower in spots. If you do find yourself in this situation, consider the terrain and obstacles ahead, especially if you're operating east of Jabiru. You know, might only be 1,000 feet. That's there, the escarpment's there, and there's actually little obstacles further out that you know, you might not see in the last minute if you see it at all. Something I want to add to that is that obstacles, I do a lot of coastal flying, and there are actually antennas everywhere, especially out in Arnhem Lands itself. You may run into something that you might not know is there. If you do get yourself in a low visibility situation, slowing down is a good option. Okay, if you are, you know, on the deck running around 500 feet, you want to buy yourself a bit of time, a bit of breathing room, slow the aircraft down, get a stage of flap out. That's a good strategy. Okay, plus you're going to be burning a little less fuel. Ask yourself, can you maintain a horizon? What I'm trying to depict in the pictures here is, you know, this is me heading off to Bathurst Island. Okay, this is me heading off to Bathurst Island, and it becomes quite difficult. Notice that I tried to show it in this photo, and I appreciate the guys up the back a bit harder. That the horizon is becoming less and less defined. Okay, imagine yourself trying to do a 180-degree turn back at 500 feet. It's probably typical because you're going to be pressed to a point where you go, well, I've got to make a decision here. What the hell am I going to do? And the other point I want to press is that, generally speaking, take this with a grain of salt, but I found in my experience that maintaining a horizon over flat country, over land, versus flat country where we know there's no obstacles because it's water, there's nothing out there, it's a lot more difficult to maintain that visual horizon over the water. Okay, so using the Darwin Bathurst Island example, whereas, you know, running around east of Darwin, you know, around that Adelaide River area, all the way out to Jabiru before the escarpment, it's quite a bit easier to get around. Plan an escape route. You know, can I get a 180-degree turn out of here? Can I land at the airstrip beside me? You know, I've done that. Easy. Can I find a gap elsewhere? Okay, and this is some of the dramas that, you know, the lack of experience fleshes out. You know, you might fly another 20 miles, you know, in the wrong direction. When I say the wrong direction, sort of 90 degrees to where you're going off your track. You'll find a gap. Okay, they're there, they exist. Okay, if they don't, turn around, go back to where you came from, or find an airfield close by. Wait it out. Spending half an hour on the ground. I've done that before. Easy. You know, wait for the weather to pass. Keep on going. Do I need to turn back? You know, at what point do I do? More importantly, especially if you guys are IFR rated, might be in a VFR machine, but you've got an instrument rating, or even guys that don't have a instrument rating. What is my lowest safe? If I get pushed on the deck so far that I can't continue, there may be a safer option to climb, but know where your lowest safe is, or what it is, and where it comes from. So Berk charts, TAC charts, Oz runways is awesome. So is AvPlan. Not to pick out one particular Aussie AFB product, but they're there, you know, also on Jeff FD. Special VFR, more 310 flying. I can't remember where these were taken, but yeah, this is typical of a day out in the bush flying around. I'd be guessing that's probably somewhere east of Darwin, out near Alligator River. It's one of those days. Why is special VFR a threat? The tower will tell you, but they'll tell you to stay on the ground. The conditions required for special VFR flight, you know, the flight needs to be conducted clear of cloud. You'll see my point in a sec. Visibility, not less than 1,600 metres for aeroplanes. Not much. Sucks. We all know through our instrument ratings that 1,500 metres of vis will get us out to just beyond the Pappies, okay, off the bottom of an ILS. That's pretty much how much vis you're going to have. It's like holding the hand in front of your face. So, yeah, I've been in these situations. I'll tell you when, or sorry, I'll give you advice on when this is to be used and when it's to be not, or at least in my opinion, when you should. To get you back home, if no other options exist, you can't wait out the weather. You know, you are sitting beside Darwin, you've got no fuel to go anywhere else. You may ask, approach or tower if you're close in, hey, can I upgrade to special VFR because, you know, I'm below 5K vis, or I'm below 500 feet because the cloud base is pressed down. I've done it before. When you shouldn't. I've seen this before, and unfortunately, towers turn around and go, no, we're not going to give you special VFR to get out. Don't use it to get out of the terminal environment. In my opinion, that's just bad juju. The reason I say that is because the airfield that you're departing out of, it may be the airfield you need to return to. You have dramas, you got to fly back through all the same crap that you just took off out of. And it may be worse down the road. You haven't given yourself the 180-degree turn back to get yourself out of dramas. So don't use it to leave the airfield you're departing from. If the weather gets worse, you have no way out. Simple as that. I'll tell you a quick story about rolling back through Darwin one day. I was in 310, seems to be 310 centric, even though I did most of my hours in the 402 up here. Yeah, I was coming back in, I got to about 30 miles Darwin, and it was just one of those monsoonal days that I got pressed down on the deck, down at 500 feet, cloud base, you know, it was getting lower in front of me, and unfortunately, the vis was getting worse as well. But, you know, getting to that Adelaide River area, and I had no real way out, had no other airfields to go to. I was short on juice. I had the holding fuel, you know, it was 60 holding on Darwin, but nowhere to go. So approach gave me the clearance in under special VFR. I got out to Hope Inlet, as we're all familiar. The VFR routes have changed in the last few years. Hope Inlet, I'm happy as days. I spent 20 minutes circling around in clear air. It was great, you know, 1,000 feet, I'm winning. Meanwhile, you know, the Qantas in from Brisbane, they're doing missed approach off the bottom of the ILS. Jetstar's doing the same. Careflight, I'm sure, are out doing the same thing as well. After 20 minutes of holding, approach calls up and go, how you going out there? Can you see the airfield? Yes, yeah, yep, I can see the airfield. Yeah, there's a break in the weather, I can see it for sure. Come up on tower frequency. I won't give the rego away. But, hey, where are you? Meanwhile, I'm rolling out close right base on the runway 29. Yeah, I'm here. Can you give me a landing clearance? Because I'm pretty much over the high Ls. Yeah, not a great day in the office. But, you know, I made it in, happy days, and I walked away from it. Did I really need to be there? Probably not, okay. Did I use special VFR to get me back into town because I had very few options? Yes, I did, okay. But I wouldn't recommend it. The reason I brought up this CTC is for you guys that want to depart out on special VFR, or you're trying to get yourself back in. I don't know how I cleared up this tower. It's 550 foot. It's the SBS antenna. That's about a 4 mile final on your right hand side as you're rolling down the ILS. Okay, so about 1,200 feet for the VFR guys. If you look at your right hand window, you'll see it right there. To give you guys a picture of what's in the broader sense. So, you know, be it I'll be out flying a 210 that probably never will ever again, but you know, say I was, or you know, in the Dash 8 these days, jump up here, you know, I look at the taps and gaps, great, you know, we all do, we're legally required. No TAMs can be useful, you know, for flooded runways, you know, stuff that's out of action. I wouldn't rely on this, but I've seen sometimes where they publish where there's no fuel. Okay, at certain aerodromes, so Alcoa might not have fuel for whatever reason. And, you know, obviously for you IFR guys, if the nav aids are US. NAPES charts, so, you know, mid-level significant weather, SIGMETs, all that sort of stuff. Windy.com, and I did mention the Bureau. The Bureau met radars, okay, great. I appreciate that most of you guys probably take the South Goulburn Islands or the Warrawee weather radar for granted these days. That come in just in the last wet season that I flew before I went down to Broken Hill. That was the greatest thing ever because I could see what was going on out in Arnhem Land and plan accordingly. EFBs, they didn't exist back in my day. It's starting to sound old now. Before then, there was Garmin 96 and nothing else. Okay, this thing has paid for itself that many times, it's not funny. Okay, it's a GPS for those that are uninitiated. But look, back to the point. Overlays are great. They tell you what's going on almost in real time. Okay, be aware of the limitations. Obviously, Michael and Sam mentioned that there is a 6-minute gap between radar paints. So yes, use what's freely available on the net. Make sure that you're aware of its limitations. Yes, look, if you are operating in IMC with or without a weather radar, great tool to potentially plan around stuff that's coming up. Not a tool for penetration, okay? Just want to make that clear. Telephone the guys. You know, Sam's heard me, from me on the other end of the phone. You know, rang him up on the sat phone. Hey, I'm 300 miles west of Darwin. You know, what's the weather between me and Darwin like? And he'll come back and go, yeah, good luck. Simple terms, until you validate what's actually on the TAFs, okay? Dry season, no holding. Wet season, 60 holding. Guarantee it, that will keep you out of trouble, okay? And for those who are disappearing out into the bush with no fuel, so say you're going to, I don't know, Numbulwar, Bullman, those kind of places, always plan to come back with 60 minutes worth of gas, or at least a reliable fuel source that's not clouded in. This is sort of ties in with one and the same. Stuff that you've got to access to in flight. You guys are pretty cross it these days. The Telstra network, I don't know if things have changed. Granted, it's been, what, 7 years since I last flew out in the bush up here. But it was either Telstra network or nothing. Bureau Met Weather Radar, gold, especially if you're on limited data. Have one of the apps on your phone that has access to it. I still use it all the time. EFB overlays, gold, NAPES, Meteor species. When Leanne comes up, she goes, oh, I've got a specie Darwin. Take note, write it down. She'll read it out, generally speaking. If she doesn't, go, hey, Leanne, request. She go, what do you want this time around? Windy.com, great. But look, to step back to this Meteor species, as much as I joke, that will paint the picture, okay? If you are en route on the way home, you've still got, you know, half hour, 3/4 an hour on the way home, might as well just pull the power back because there's no use in getting there in a hurry if there's a thunderstorm sitting over the top of Darwin. Mark 1 eyeball, you know, can't see through it, don't fly through it. As far as VHF, HF goes, call up Leanne again and go, hey, look, I'm outside of 4G coverage, or you haven't paid your phone bill. Hey, can you give me an appreciation? This is as much as I make a joke. Can you give me an appreciation of what the weather is doing between me and Darwin, or me and where I'm going? And she's got the weather radar available to her. She may have windy available to her, sat pics and all that sort of stuff. Either that or through HF, the guys can actually give you appreciation of what's going on out there. And yeah, plain English, just go, hey, what's the weather doing in Tyndall area? And they'll come back and go, yeah, it's clear, or no, there's weather out to the northeast, you know, and they'll give you a rough idea of what's going on. Meteor species are golden again, and Mark 1 eyeball. There's a story to this picture. I took off at about 5:30 one morning in, I won't mention the rego, one of the 402s. And anyway, tower comes back and they go, oh yeah, such and such, cleared for takeoff, and the inflection in their voice, it's beautiful weather now. At the time, it was absolutely hammering down rain. I reckon it's probably 2,000 kVs, you know, like right on the threshold that you'd be comfortable to depart up here. And I'll tell you what, the sunrise, after battling all that weather about, I don't know, 40 miles east of Darwin, you know, it was a hard slog just to get 40 miles. The sun had never looked so good. It was even worse in the afternoon. So in-flight diversions and deviations, as mentioned earlier by the other presenters, that plan to manoeuvre early, okay? Less track miles, less fuel burn, simple as that. Plan to divert en route, aerodrome if locked in, okay? Sit on the ground, wait out half an hour. You know, passengers are yeah, they're not going to be liking it, but it's better to be late than never. Otherwise, you know, ask what the weather's doing up ahead. You know, call up your mates. Your mates are out there as well. They're probably struggling as much as you are. They'll be able to tell you what the weather's doing. You know, yeah, it's crap out near Jabiru, but a little bit to the north, it's not too bad. If all else fails, talk to Leanne. She'll talk back to you. Otherwise, you know, in worst case, you can call up on 121.5 and go, hey, is there anyone in the this area? What's the weather doing? And in between Qantas and that, coming back to you and going, you're on guard. Someone might actually be able to go, hey, come up on numbers and talk to me. In-flight deviations, yeah, cool. Look, what I'm trying to get across to you here is that, yep, that is Darwin, the uninitiated. Line of storms rolling in through from the southeast, which is pretty typical for the build down from monsoon and everything else. My point is that there's no point in trying to battle these things in, you know, might get there in King Air or, you know, whatever you're driving, but 210, 402, you know, you may struggle. So you've got a few options. What are they? Can I hold? Can I divert? Do I pull in somewhere? How much fuel do I have? How much fuel you have is going to determine what you can do, how long you can hold for, where you can and can't go. Can I wait out the storms at a nearby airfield? Sure you can. You know, this picture is supposed to denote delisable, you know, so for you guys heading down to Port Keats or Woody Cappadia or Palumpa, Pepinati, take your choice. You know, you might be able to pull into Delisable and wait it out for half an hour. There's no point in trying to get to the Thunderies there. I don't know what the financial is for your company, but they're probably going to be cheering that you spent half an hour on the ground as opposed to half an hour in the air. You've saved them fuel, you've saved them MR time, and you've saved yourself stress. Pick an airfield that's got fuel, preferably. Tell someone you're going there. There's no point in rocking in, only to have a SAR time expire or someone be worried about where you're going. Otherwise, hold. You're carrying the holding fuel. You should have planned for it. Simple as that. Always give yourself a way out. I can't stress that. Thunderstorms, pick your route early and make sure that this picture is supposed to denote that this is the upwind side of the thundery. This is the downwind side of the thundery. And always try and pick the upwind side of it. Sometimes it's not always possible, but the major threat is hail falling out of this. Up in the tropics, down low, not so much of a threat. Up high, most certainly. Down south, unforgivable. Deviate early to conserve fuel. You know, make the choice early. Fly around it, don't fly through it. If you're going to give yourself a diversion around these things, which I hope you do, minimum of 5 nautical miles down low. It's a good rule of thumb. Below 10,000 feet. That will keep you clear of a couple of different threats, turbulence, lightning, etc. 10 or more if you're above 10. Okay, mainly aimed at you turbine guys. Again, to mitigate turbulence and lightning risk. Cool. Here's anyone fly uniform Charlie Delta. Point is that don't wait till the last minute to get around this thing. Yeah, you can. Okay, but it's going to be a lot easier if you make the choice early. Okay, so make the choice early. Have a look on the horizon. You can tell what's going on. Have a look at the PFB. You see that the weather's there, generally speaking. Get around it early. So yeah, I was coming back from Pelly one day and trying to get into Darwin. I ended up 75 miles off track. That is not a personal record. My personal record is 250 miles south of track because there was Sigmet 01 issued of 400 miles of thunderstorms halfway between Christmas Island and Broome. Funnily enough, I took a photo of this. This is the actual day, and that's a photo of the bottom of the weather. I was $4,000 at the time. When you go to school, no dogs, no horses, no crocodiles, no buffalo allowed. Perceived pressure. Look, the reason I want to wind up with this is that we're our own personal worst enemies. Okay, we want to get the job done for many different reasons. Okay, we feel like we're pressured in because, you know, oh geez, there's 60 holding on, and oh, I'm going to rock up with 60 minutes of fuel. You know, that personal pressure, or the perceived personal pressure, or, you know, is my boss going to sack me or not promote me to the twin or what have you? Okay, we all want to do a good job. Perceived pressure can come from your fuel state, be it that you've just gotten yourself there, or you've got this idea in your head that you're short of fuel when you're not, when you got your 60 holding. Okay, the fuel is there to be used, I guarantee it. Okay, otherwise, you know, why put tempos on taps? So don't fly through thunderstorms. Got the holding fuel, use it. Storms at the airfield, slow down, just pull the power back, you know, 210, fly along easily, 95 knots, no worries, you know, 18 inches, stage your flap out, happy days. No point in trying to beat them to the airfield if they're already there. En route, you know, if we are starting to look at going, well, am I short of fuel? Consider that you still got your contingency fuel available. So, you know, I think it was 10% for most charter operators, or variable reserve for old school operators. You know, it's there for a reason. You know, if you need to get around thunderstorms, burn into it. You know, at some point, you need to decide, is rocking up 5 minutes less fuel, chewing into your 60 holding, better and a better decision than trying to fly through a thunderstorm? I think we know what the answer is. Okay. So I'm not advocating breaking rules or anything else. I'm advocating for good decisions if you get pushed into a corner. Pushy passengers, yep. Some people, you need to get in the aeroplane and tell them, hey, you know, it's safe, let's go, because it is, okay? Others will sit at Bathurst Island and go, how come I'm not going back to Darwin, you know? Unfortunately, usually they work for the government. I recall one day sitting there with a 402 or a Conquest or something, and this bloke comes up to me and goes, well, mate, I've got a 330. I go, that's great. He goes, oh, but we've got to get going. We're going to be late. I go, well, it's, you know, black as day. You can see the weather to the south. You know, it's between here and Darwin. Showed them weather radar. Oh, but I've got to get going. So I handed them books to the aeroplane. I go, see you later. At the end of the day, your boss wants the aeroplane back in one piece. Okay, you may or may not make a great decision. You're going to screw up. I guarantee it. You know, I've done it plenty of times. I've made poor decisions. We all have. It's all about building experience. Simple as that. But look, the boss isn't going to sack you for, you know, pulling into somewhere and waiting it out, even if you get there the next day. And if they do, well, are they really worth working for? Okay, so I guarantee you that all the boss will want is, you know, the aeroplane safe and the passengers safe. You know, they want return business. If you're making safe and sound decisions, hopefully that gets back to the customer, and the customer comes back. Okay, simple as that. Well, the last point I want to press is that it's hard to say no the first time. It really is. Sucks. You know, you want to do a good job. You want to jump on the twin. You want to jump on the caravan. You want the next big thing. But, you know, at some point you're going to have to say, no, I can't do that. You know, try and, you know, soften the blow, and, you know, especially when you're talking to your passengers and go, look, you know, the weather, it sucks. Show them. You know, they'll understand. But I guarantee once you say no for the first time, it gets a lot easier after that. Okay, don't go saying no as your default. Offer solutions. That's what we do. You know, yeah, cool. Look, we might have to drop into this airfield, pick up more gas. It's going to cost you more. Okay, that is a solution. That might be an acceptable one. Otherwise, the customer will come back and go, oh, no worries. Yeah, we'll just go tomorrow. You know, look, you're not at war. No passenger, water sample, logbook hour, even if it's night time through ATPL, isn't worth your life. Okay. Same point. Can't see through it. Don't fly through it. Always give yourself a way out.